This week, a brand new ad for SA Tourism. It's a campaign that looks at the country through the eyes of young consumers. Also, a conversation about rebuilding South Africa's nation brand with a leading entrepreneur. A clever marketing stunt for a local craft beer brand that had the Australians scratching their heads. And an eye-catching advertising execution highlighting the perils of using mobile phones while driving. And also this, a response from the Advertising Standards Authority on the ongoing Herbex false advertising case. A very warm welcome, and we're going to start with this. Last week, I attended an event called the Brand Summit, the idea of which was to recapture the country's brand narrative after 9 years of difficulty and uncertainty, all overarched by endemic corruption and state capture. Now, the sense was for a range of speakers to add their voice to the debate on how to shine brand South Africa once again. Among the speakers were South Africa's Chief Justice Mogoeng and well-known entrepreneur Crispin Son, Executive Director of the Gamera Investments Group, and also son, you might know, of the famous Franklin Son, an educator and a former ambassador to the United States. Crispin had some very interesting views. I have coerced him to come on the program to share them with us. It's so nice to see you again. Where does the South African brand find itself right now, do you think?
I think there's a consensus view that the brand is in trouble. The way the brand is perceived in international markets, lots of venture capitalists have spoken about the fact that it's incredibly difficult to raise capital in foreign markets for new ventures, purely because people can't assess the political risk. So, and then also the way people are perceiving South Africa, there are other investment destinations open to them. And so increasingly the summit also revealed that the brand is in deep trouble.
You've also said in the past that perhaps the brand is too inextricably linked with our leaders, that it's up to South Africans, you and me within that group, to take a degree of responsibility. And the problem is we tend to abrogate that responsibility. Absolutely.
So, it was a fabulous opportunity that I had to talk about the brand post-1994. So it forced me to research it a bit and to think about it. And what struck me is that the journey doesn't begin in 1994. It actually starts way before 1994. And, the whole issue that became clear to me is that going back as far back as Verwoerd, Verwoerd was a fascist, and not in the swear word that it's become today. As an ideology, he believed that he was the most important person to lead South Africa into the vision that he had. And from there, that what started happening is all institutions were destroyed. Effectively, it was around individuals, and the country brand became increasingly and inextricably linked to the individuals, to the leaders. It wasn't about the country and the country's proposition, it was about what the leaders stood for. And then came 1994, and once again we were blessed, unfortunately, with Nelson Mandela. And the Mandela brand became almost bigger than the country brand. And we benefited hugely from that. And that's the tradition that has continued. It all revolves around the leader and too little about the country, its people, and what each has to offer. And then we tend to focus, if you look at all the public information available about South Africa, around things that we actually have very little control over. Our geopolitical location, our mineral wealth, and so on. Not about the people, not about our unique offering. And I think therein lies an opportunity and a big challenge.
And the point that the Chief Justice was making is that we tend to default and hand over that responsibility to either the courts or to government. So if we are too dependent on leadership, there's that inextricable link between brand and South Africans. How do we break that? Because in many ways it's almost addictive now. And it's difficult to break an addiction.
So we have a unique opportunity and challenge. The unique opportunity is that we have a new president and a new leader. And I think the first thing that we see is he manages the media a lot differently to the previous presidents. He's more focused on the issue than seeking the limelight for himself. He seems to be a task-orientated person, focused on getting the job done, as opposed to building the Ramaphosa brand. The second thing that feeds into the opportunity is we come through a period of incredibly focused civil civil activism, where civil society has stood up. And that presents an opportunity. It presents an opportunity for us ordinary South Africans like you and I, you less ordinary than me, but ordinary South Africans.
You flatter me. I can have that argument with you at some other point.
Ordinary South Africans to stand up and take a position for what
does that
see.
mean? Stand up and take a position.
And stand up, take a position is how do we want to be seen in the world? How do we want people to see us? So when you speak to visitors to our country, oh, it's a friendly country, it's beautiful, great natural beauty. We don't sit and think about how we want people to see us. We travel, there's a bigger class of people and group of people traveling. Social media and the way the media has evolved allows us opportunity to see other societies. So we're now in a position to compare ourselves to other societies and say, where do we fit in? How would we as individuals and as a collective, as a country, like ourselves to be seen? And have those conversations.
And Crispin, the counterpoint to that is ordinary South Africans will turn around and say, well, my voice counts for nothing. I'm small. There's very little I can do to influence. It's also about re-empowering them to embrace the importance of the brand itself.
Absolutely, and I would disagree with that, with the way you did right to how ordinary South Africans think about it. But if that were the case, we would not have found ourselves out of the Zuma era. What ordinary South Africans stood up and did was to say, this is what we don't want. We don't want this. And it took us 10 years to figure out that we don't want it. And it took us 10 years to figure out what we can actually do about it, that we are in a democracy. I think our big challenge now is not to ask the question anymore what we don't want, but to start focusing and asking the dinner table, the braaivleis conversations, what do we want? What do we want to be? That's the challenge that I think Chief Justice Mogoeng laid before our door.
But in order for you to have that conversation, you've got to get rid of two things. You've got to get rid of the nascent anger that exists in this country and the cynicism. Yeah. So before you can have that braaivleis conversation, because what tends to happen is that overarches everything. So you've got to filter that out.
And you do, but there's also an important two-letter word, us and we. Who is us and who is we? We are still a very divided nation. We battle with issues on poverty, on race, gender discrimination. So there is a very important question around the brand of who is we? When we sit around the table, how do we want to be seen? Who is we? Who are we? That is a big question I think South Africans are grappling with.
With the caveat that there will be 55 million different answers to that, yeah.
Well, I think yes. And, you know, there's this whole age-old adage, there's strength in diversity. Yeah. Why don't we embrace the fact that we are different, that we bring something different to the equation? And it's not around the leader anymore. The leader is a representation. He serves the brand for a period. He's only the custodian for a period. But we are actually the brand as the people, not our geopolitical location.
So final question then. You're a business guy. That old cliche about you can't manage it unless you can measure it. How do you measure this?
Well, I think the first thing is FDI is the easy one, because when people like what they see, they feel comfortable, they're willing to put money behind it. I think that's the first way of measuring it. And already we are seeing that we're in trouble. People, I think the ratings agencies have a fair amount to do about it, but people are cautious about it. What struck me at the SA Brand Summit was when venture capitalists spoke and entrepreneurs who are taking projects to the venture capital markets globally and expressed their concern in getting access to capital. I realized that's a problem. And when people start backing projects with high risk, but they like the environment and the opportunity, that's when we're beginning to win again.
I hope you'll come back so we can continue this conversation, because it's being seeded in South Africa right now. And people like you, Crispin, I guess me as well, we've got a role to play in this particular narrative. Thank you so much, Crispin Son, for joining us on Magzone Media. Now, I want to stay on the topic of nation branding. SA Tourism releasing a new campaign. It's called This Is Your Country, and it sets out to get young black people to travel South Africa and to enjoy activities with their friends in places where they ordinarily wouldn't feel too comfortable.
Hi man, Shai safari ngama kusheshebo. Sizo tipeti tikama. City siwelele.
Next on the programme, a local craft beer brand plays a trick on Australian beer lovers, and a smart execution by a Swedish advertising agency highlighting the dangers of using your mobile phone when driving.